Lesson 1 in the trigonometry unit is a review of Pythagorean theorem. The trigonometry that we're going to do in grade 10 is all right angle trigonometry, and Pythagorean theorem is a formula that helps you solve right angle triangle problems. So Pythagorean theorem only works on right triangles. It won't work on equilateral, it won't work on most isosceles, it only works on right triangles. And Pythagorean theorem only helps us find information about the sides. So whether it be a leg is just a side, or the hypotenuse. Remember, the hypotenuse is the longest side of a triangle, a right triangle. Remember, the hypotenuse is opposite the 90-degree, and that little square represents the 90-degree symbol. The hypotenuse in the formula is labeled C. Again, the hypotenuse is special. You know, it's opposite the 90 degrees, as I said. It's the longest side, as I said. So in the formula, it's special, and that is by itself. So here's this little formula that you probably learned a long time ago. A squared plus b squared is equal to c squared. And all we have to remember is a and b are the legs, and c is the hypotenuse. And there's only two kinds of questions we have to worry about when we're using Pythagorean theorem. And they go in the form of either tell me what the hypotenuse is or tell me one of the legs is. And the mathematics we need to be most careful with is order of operations, or BEDMAS. And if we're consistent, if we do the same thing every question, then we shouldn't have to worry about this at all. So let's look at a few examples that illustrate the two kind of questions we need to be able to solve, and what we have to be careful with. So here's a right triangle. Again, here's our right triangle, and I want to find the hypotenuse. I want to find C. And we always want to label our triangles. It doesn't matter what side's A, what side's B. It doesn't matter at all, but it matters C. What I really suggest you do is always start off having the formula, write down the formula. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to put the numbers in the correct spot. So after we have our formula, then what we're going to do is we're going to put the numbers where they go, and this is where they go. Now, our next step, again, order of operations, would be, wow, I see exponents and I see addition, and we're going to do our exponents before the addition. 144, or 12 squared is 144, 16 squared is 256, and that's equal to c squared. So again, I'm going to write this down. After we substitute into the proper place, then we are going to square the numbers, and we're always going to do this. And then we're going to add the numbers. So when we see a problem like this is what we're always going to do. And we get c squared is equal to 400. Now remember, we don't want to know what c squared is equal to. We want to know what c is equal to. So the next step is to take the square root. And when you take the square root, we really take the square root of both sides, and we end up with c is equal to 20. Now, if you have a calculator, which I hope you do, well, what you can do is you can do this all together. So we could go 12 squared plus 16 squared equals, and we get the 400 like I have. And then what we can do is we can take the square root. So on my calculator, the square root is right there, and then I punch in 400 and hit enter. So this is the way we're going to do problems all the time. We're going to plug in the numbers. We're going to get rid of the squares. In this case, we're going to add and take the square root. So here's one kind of triangle we have to be able to solve. The other kind of triangle we have to be able to solve is when we have to know one of the sides. So remember, The hypotenuse is always opposite the 90-degree angle. And we're going to start off with our formula, a squared plus b squared is equal to c squared. And we're going to plug them in the right spot. So I called that a. Then we have our b squared, and then we have our c squared. So what I did, just like the example, we made our substitution. Now, our second step is we're going to square the numbers. So we're going to go ahead and do that. And 7 squared is 49. And again, we can use our calculator if we're not sure. And 25 squared is 625. Now, in this problem right here, this is the one that's a little bit different. But here's always what we're going to do. We're always going to bring this number to the other side by subtracting. So we are always going to bring the number over. Bring the number over and subtract. We're always going to do that. So in this case right here, when I bring the number over and subtract, again, we have a calculator. We're going to have 625 minus 49. And we're going to get 576. So now we have b squared is equal to 576. And just like the example we just did, in order to get rid of the square, we're going to have to take the square root. And again, we get our calculator. Second, I get my square root symbol, 576. And in this example, it's a nice number, 24. So again, square root, but you don't really have to do that, but you do have to write b is equal to 24. Now again, we want to make sure our answer makes sense. As long as the answer we got is less than the hypotenuse, then that's good. Okay, one last example. So this isn't an example of doing Pythagorean theorem. It's a simple example of can you find side A using Pythagorean theorem. So first of all, what has to happen to use Pythagorean theorem? Well, we have to have a right triangle. And in this case right here, we do have a right triangle. So this is looking good. But in order to use Pythagorean theorem, you not only need a right triangle, but you need two pieces, you need two sides. And right here, I only know one side. I only know the hypotenuse. So in this question right here, we might go, oh, I can't figure out how big side A is. Well, that's true. You can't figure out how big side A is with Pythagoras, but you can figure out how big side A is with another right triangle formula, and that's what we're going to look at for the rest of the unit, other right triangle formulas.